start with the cold case unit. I mean, you actually started that, and I don't know whether it's 97, 98, something like that. But what was the thought into getting this started?
That is really a great, that's a whole another TV show. So it was probably maybe 98, very shortly after I got elected, and I got elected in November 96, so might have been 97, could have been early 98. I was at the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association meeting in Columbus, and at that time there were 4 lady prosecutors, and one of them was in Cleveland. Her name was Stephanie Tubbs Jones. She was a former judge, and then she went on to Congress, died had a medical issue. But anyway, she was sort of a mentor to me and a friend. And so we were having a drink in the bar after the meeting, and she was complaining about the fact that she had to do this DNA stuff on Sam Shepard. Sam Shepard was a very big deal case in Cleveland, and it was the basis of the Fugitive TV show and the Fugitive movie. And so we all know about the Fugitive. Everybody knows about Sam Shepard because of that. But you know, I grew up in Cleveland, so I remember my grandmother talking about that case. And she said, well, Sam Shepard's, of course, dead. He was ultimately found not guilty by F. Lee Bailey, but was he ever exonerated? No. And his son wanted him exonerated. And so they were doing all this stuff going on. And she was talking about it and kind of bemoaning the fact that, you know, Sam did it. We all know he did it, but, you know, he got a raw deal in the trial, and F. Lee Bailey came in and blah, blah, blah. So we said goodnight. I went to bed, and 3 a.m., and this sounds so corny, I don't even like saying it, but it's the way it was. I just woke up just like completely from a sound sleep, and I was like, oh my God, if they can do Sam Shepard, we can do the Cook brothers. The Cook brothers were serial killers that did 9 murders here in 1980, 1981. And I had one of the cases that someone else was charged with, so I knew all about the Cook brothers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get back home. I got to see if we still have the case. Do we still have the DNA? Do we have the rape kit? Do we have the witness? Blah, blah, blah. And so Frank Stiles, I loved. He was still in the police department then. I called Frank. I said, let's see what we can find out about this case. And went from there. It launched the cold. We said, we have to do this. We're going to do this cold case. And then we said, how many other cold cases could we do? How many other cases are there that we now could look at with new eyes? Not only DNA, but maybe other technology that we didn't have. And it was amazing. I mean, it truly was. It took off, and we solved so many cases and brought closure to so many people. I get the chills talking about it because, you know, people think that, oh, we've just moved on and we forgot and we don't care. But really, no, that's not it. And I wonder, 20 years from now, what technology will be available that will be able to solve cases that today we haven't been able to solve. I don't know. So that's how it started, and it went on from there. We had different people that worked on the cold cases from here, and the police department assigned wonderful people to the unit. Steve Forrester was a sergeant, the police department, also an attorney, and Tom Ross, who worked for me, and Frank, and Jay Gast, was on just wonderful, wonderful detectives that were tenacious in their efforts to solve these old cases, and they did a wonderful job. So that started the unit, and of course Father Robinson spun into that because we had started the unit, we had people willing to look at old cases with new eyes, and so why not?
So the Attorney General's office, I think Claudia, I believe, took the letter to the Attorney General's office, and then they told Tom or whatever and said, hey, you guys should take a look at this. And he recognized Father Robinson as a key suspect from back in 1980. So bring me in on the conversations that you guys had, because this case, a case is probably never truly closed, but it hadn't really been actively investigated and until like about 2003, and you guys get this letter. So when did you see the letter, and what were those conversations like when you guys were considering reopening this?
Well, we all knew about what had happened in 1980 because it was a big story. I mean, it was a big deal. And we all, probably, I was a young prosecutor, so I wasn't in administration, I wasn't a boss here, but I was trying cases. And I can remember talking about what happened, that, you know, Father Robinson was a suspect, you know, and they had him at the police station, they had him in the polygraph room, and bingo, you know, all of a sudden, knock on the door, and we're done here, and that's it, and the case went cold from that day on. So the letter comes, I think it's all very ironic, and that is, I guess, part of the uniqueness of the story, that you just can never know what is going to happen that's going to cause you to think about something and to take action that results in this kind of a result. So the way that I recall it is the committee at the diocese got the letter. They thought it was goofy and crazy and weren't going to do anything with it. One of the members of that committee was a psychologist who said, no, I don't agree with that, and I'm going to resign from the committee, but I don't think that this is not nothing. Somebody should look at this. It sounds crazy, but, you know, truth is crazier than fiction sometimes. And it went to the Attorney General's office. Then it came here, and yeah, the letter mentions Father Robinson. And we're like, whoa, you know, here's somebody that's bringing him up in another vein. We didn't know anything about this nun. This is a totally different nun from the nun that was murdered. And I said, we have a cold case unit. Let's look at it. Let's see what we have. Let's see what do we still have. So that started the chain.
Yeah, and so you think about 1980 again, he was the main suspect, and they just couldn't, I think the prosecutor back then just didn't have enough that he felt comfortable to charge him. I know a big thing in this case was when they exhumed, you know, Sister Margaret Ann, but that was after he had already been charged.
Right.
So what was the tipping point for you guys that you're able to say?
Well, the tipping point, there was a lot of tipping points, but one of the tipping points, I'm trying to think, there were several things that were really unusual and unique, but Terry Cousineau, who also works here, Terry Cousineau was a scientific investigation unit detective who had a background in art. He was also a police artist. And so the cold case guys are going to look into Father Robinson. They're going to see what evidence do they have, what do they still have in the property room, what reports, blah, blah, blah. They have the altar cloth that was laid over Sister. And Terry Cousineau looks at the altar cloth, and what does he see in the altar cloth but the upside down cross that was mentioned in the nun's letter? And so they are just ebullient, these cops, you know, they're like dancing and jig. And they call up and they want to come over because we got to show you something. Oh my gosh, you just won't believe it. Nobody ever looked at that altar cloth, I don't think. At least we don't know if anyone ever did. We don't have any documentation that anyone did. It was just one of the pieces of evidence that was confiscated from the scene of the homicide. So he brings it over in this conference room and he opens it up on the table. And, you know, to my eye, and as I said, I'm not an artist, but it looked like a bunch of holes and there's a bunch of blood. But he says, no, look, you know, and he shows, and he superimposed some kind of a pattern over it. He says, look, this is how it was laid, and this is the upside down cross. That's a priest. Oh my, you know, who would put an upside down cross on a dead person? And then he says, look at all these blood spatters on this altar cloth that have a pattern that looked like the letter opener, which was the piece of equipment that was taken from his desk drawer in his room. So that was kind of an aha moment, really. And then of course, it went further. We looked for different pieces of evidence, and we had this letter opener, and the letter opener had a speck of blood under it, but it was too little blood to determine if it was animal blood or human blood. And whether it was, Father Robinson's or sisters. But it was in a desk. Now, I don't know if you have a desk at your office. I do. And I could tell you, if you took my letter opener, I have maybe one or two, maybe three in there. They are not immaculate by any means. This was pristine, this letter opener, and this little tiny speck of blood underneath it. So somebody cleaned that letter opener, right? That was interesting, I thought. So we get the letter opener, we got the altar cloth, and then it took on a lot of publicity came about. And here's a really interesting thing. The people that came forward in the 2000s, 2003, 2004, before we tried the case, those people were all available. They were all at Mercy Hospital on the day that she died. And if the police said, "Did you see anything unusual?" they said no, because it's not really anything unusual to see a priest coming out of a chapel. That is not, in the eyes of the people that later on became witnesses for us, unusual. So nobody really knew about the things that they had seen. And there were a number of people that had seen him coming out of that chapel. Very interesting.
But there had to be a point when maybe you and Tom and Steve and all you guys kind of get in a room and they ask you, can we charge him? What was that conversation like? I mean, this is, you charge a lot of people in your career, but this is different. I mean, this is definitely different. This is the only priest that's ever been charged with killing a nun in the United States.
Well, we didn't think of it like that. I think we thought of it as a man that killed a woman. There was a homicide. She died on Easter Eve in the sacristy of Mercy Hospital, a place that she had been in charge of, and it just was left unsettled for all those years. We should do something about that. And we got a lot of experts before we actually indicted him. We had Julie Saul, who was a tremendous forensic anthropologist. She was world famous. She's still here in town. You could probably talk to her. She did plane crashes and all kinds of different disasters all over the world. And so we had her with this letter opener, and once we exhumed the body and we had the mandible, key in a lock, the letter opener in this hole in the mandible, which is the jawbone, was amazing. But then we also had Paulette Sutton, who was a blood spatter expert, talked about the blood, the patterns on the altar cloth and blood, and where the blood was on the forehead. That's last rites. I didn't know all those things because I grew up Lutheran, not Catholic, and we didn't have that, but still we learned about that. And there were patterns on the altar cloth that looked like the letter opener had been laid in blood and then placed on her chest and on her forehead. So we had experts to verify that. We had another expert that was a tool mark expert, and we had and Dr. Henry Lee, another forensic pathologist, and Dr. Barnett. So when you put all these experts together and they gave you their opinion about the significance of the evidence, it was pretty overwhelming to me. And I said, if a jury doesn't buy it, they don't buy it, but we have to try. We should. It's the right thing to do. And I think we all agreed that it was.
So after he gets charged, again, it's like 1 or 2 months later, they actually exhume her body.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that decision? Because again, you're exhuming a nun.
Well, we had this letter opener, and we had these world-famous forensic anthropologists right here in our own coroner's office who said, if you really want to be definitive about it, you could take the altar cloth and you could see that the tears were made by something that was sort of kite-shaped. And the letter opener was kite-shaped. So as opposed to a knife or a switchblade or a pencil or a screwdriver or any other kind of thing that could have been penetrating her and stabbing her to death, the holes in the altar cloth were made by something that had the same tip as the letter opener. But wouldn't it be better to have her body? And if we could do that, we should do that. This was from them. They were the experts. So of course, if we can do that, we should do that. And so we did that.
And that's an incredibly key moment because that thing did fit exactly into the wounds in the mandible, and
It's an aha moment. Again, there were aha moments. Maybe nobody would have exhumed the body back in 1980. Maybe that never would have happened. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there wasn't a person that could have looked at the altar cloth like Terry Cousineau did to see what he saw. Maybe it would have just been a piece of cloth with a bunch of holes in it. You know, he saw things in that altar cloth that were very persuasive to me. And then there was a lot of stuff that was satanic that, you know, we discussed about that. And do we go down that road? And we said, no, do not do that. That maybe there was part of that, maybe there was something to that, because she was taking everything out of the church and putting it away, sort of like what happens when Jesus is put into the tomb. So, you know, this is Easter Eve, so everything is being cleaned, pristine, and there she is laid out there on the floor in the sacristy, the tomb. You know, blind is pulled in there. And what's on the other side of the blind? The other side of the hospital where you could see in and see what was going on in there. And she's laid out there, and she's got last rites on her head, and she's got her pants pulled down, her girdle pulled down. She's got the altar cloth. You know, it was some satanic ingredients. So we did end up with another expert. You probably know about Father Grubb, who came from Chicago, and he was a exorcist priest. He wasn't a crackpot, you know, he was really a legitimately smart guy, and taught us about the rituals of the church and what it means and what this all meant to him, what he saw in this crime scene. It was very interesting, but also kind of another aha moment, because this nun said, Father Robinson, and look for an upside down cross, and guess what? We found the upside down cross, we found all these things, we found this letter opener, we got the mandible, you know, we got this priest saying, yeah, this is all last rites. This is all really heavy-duty satanic stuff.
so this was an incredible learning experience for you and probably the investigators, all that you learned about, you know, rituals, the Catholic Church. Probably.
We learned a lot. We really did learn a lot, and we learned a lot from these experts. These experts were just outstanding. And I ran into Julie Sull not that long ago, and we had a good talk about some of the things that we'd worked on together, but this was one that she'll probably never forget, because she really was a tremendous witness, and she really was key, I think. You know, I mean, is there a chance that there was another letter opener like this somewhere in the world? Sure, because he got it from a Boy Scout event that happened in Washington. There were many of these, but, you know, there was a medallion on the letter opener, and that medallion showed up in the blood on the altar cloth. I mean, it was just very, very persuasive.
Yeah. And again, you described it as it was a woman killed by a man, probably in a fit of rage or whatever reason he had. But the reality is this was a priest. So was this a very heavy decision for you, and did you get backlash from the community by doing this?
Well, I don't remember any backlash, any significant. I didn't get any death threats. Nobody TP'd my house or put any black crosses up anywhere. But I did remember saying, if we're going to prosecute a Catholic priest for killing a Catholic nun, we better be able to prove it, gang. So if you think we can prove it, and we had a great team. I mean, the prosecutors here were just phenomenal and smart and just wise. They weren't looking for, you know, stardom. They weren't looking to ride this into some other higher office or anything like that. They just wanted to do what was right. They were a tremendous team, and they thought they could do it. And we had a lot of, you know, there was a lot of teasing about whether they really wanted to do it. And I'm sure when you talk to Dean, that's Judge Mandros now, but, you know, I had him be in charge of this case because he was the criminal chief, and he was an outstanding prosecutor, an outstanding trial lawyer, but he wasn't really sure he really wanted to do this. I mean, this was a lot. And if you're going to do it, you better be able to win, because if we're going to go down this road, we better have a pretty good case. But the jury was only out about 3 hours, and it was about a 2-3 week trial. So I think it was probably pretty done. They were pretty persuasive.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, you had the eyes of the world essentially on you.
That was annoying. That part was annoying.
Yeah, talk about that. I mean, you have people from around the world,
Yeah.
particularly around the United States.
Well, it was a circus. When they talk about a circus, they were tents all over the lawn and in the trucks, and they, court TV and all of these people. But we actually made friends with the court TV people because they were very nice, and they were really into the case, and they really I think thought he was guilty. So, but I don't know. It never really affected me that much, and I wasn't in the trial. I wasn't in the courtroom like Dean was and the other prosecutors, but we just do our job. They're doing their job. Of course they are, just like you are. And we just do our job, and we're not playing to the cameras. We don't, just film whatever you want to film, and we're just going to do what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It never really, I didn't grow up with cameras in the courtroom. They didn't come at first when I was trying cases. In fact, they used to clear the courtroom when you had a kid testifying, and they'd get rid of all the people, although they really shouldn't do that. But now it's very popular. Cameras are there all the time, and we just don't really think about it that much. But there was a lot of cameras, a lot of coverage. And the one thing, this is an aside, you might not even play this, but I'll tell it to you. There were, in the trial, Judge Osawick, UT Law, Dean, UT Law, Chris Anderson, UT Law, Brad Smith, who was an intern at the time, UT Law, Larry Kiroff, UT Law. On the other side, Alan Conop, UT Law, Nicole Corey, who's a judge now, UT Law, and John Thebes, UT Law, right? So we got the judge, we got 4 prosecutors and an intern, and we got 3 defense attorneys, right? And every night on one of the channels, and I don't know if it was your channel or if it was another channel, they have 2 guys from the law school. They have, and I won't even say who they are because it doesn't matter, but 2 criminal lawyer, teacher, professor people, Monday morning quarterbacking the case. And never, ever, ever once, and they're on national TV and they're on every night, never, ever do they mention the fact that all these lawyers in this case are from UT. And I was so offended by that. More than anything that happened with the media, I was offended by that. And when the trial was over, I called the president of UT, who was a physician. He wasn't a lawyer. He was from the medical school. But I said, you have these 2 yahoos over here talking about the case every night. Wouldn't you think they would have, at one point, another said, these are all these wonderful people. There was one lady, one female, the rest were men, but they were all from our law school. So, anyway.
Yeah, that's crazy. I did not know that, so that's an interesting anecdote.
And they would beat up on the prosecutors, they're never going to win this. Oh, they're off on a wild goose chase, this and that. But obviously they were wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to respect you not wanting to poke the bear with the diocese, but I do want to ask you about this because there were a couple of no-knock warrants, and I read Steve Forrester's affidavit saying, talking about a secret diocese archive or something. What can you shed any light on that? I mean, because I never heard about a secret.
Well, there was apparently a lot of the secret files go to Rome. And that's where they are. We asked for his file. He'd been a priest for a long time. He was at Mercy Hospital, but where else was he? And what else did he do? And had he ever come in contact with the nun that sent the letter? Would they ever, he was at Ladyfield, we know that, and she was at Ladyfield, right? So, let's find out what we can about him. That would be the thing you would hope that we would do before we would be charging somebody, that we would look into their background, right? And we got like 3 pages. Dean would probably be more accurate. Maybe it was 5, maybe it was 7. But, for somebody that had been a priest for 40 years, look in my personnel file and see what's in there. There's a lot of stuff in there from a lot of years, a lot of trials, a lot of good letters and some not so nice. And there was nothing in his, nothing about this case. Like, where was it? So yeah, we did. We said, like, what is going on here, fellas? So yeah, we did do search warrants. We did. Because we wanted to know what they had about this case. Did they have anything? Did they have anything more that we didn't have? Did they know more about the nun? Did they know more about him? Because it seemed odd to me that he would be a suspect, and he was, I mean, somewhat prominent. So didn't they look into it? We just wanted to know. We didn't find out too much. We found out more from the defense attorneys on discovery.
That's funny. Can you talk about that?
Well, discovery, we give you what we have, you give us
Yeah.
what you have. So we gave them what we had, which was not much, and they gave us about 114 pages of what they had. So obviously there was information about him out there.
Yeah. Like previous, things that people were accusing him of things. In the
Well, I don't remember anything about that, just that he was, I don't know if I even want to say this,
Sure.
but this was what we were told, that sometimes the priests who are not in high favor get assigned to the hospitals. I don't know if that's true. I can't say if it's true, and it might not be true today. Maybe it was true in 1980. So maybe there was something that he had done that was untoward that sent him to Mercy Hospital.
So, just from the outside, me, looking at this, you're like, oh yeah, we went and they gave us 5 pages, and then we had to go in and just go in and go through the files, and we ended up with like 1,000 pages or hundreds of pages.
That's
To
odd,
me,
isn't
it?
it?
Might look like they're kind of trying to hide something.
Well, yeah, do you think? Normally you think, we're going to go to the church. We're going to say, hey, if I have a bad lawyer here that's committing a crime, do you think I want to keep that person employed here? I'm going to say, hey, take him away, get him out of here. This is not right. This is not good. So, I don't know. We thought, what did they know about it? Maybe they didn't know anything. Maybe they didn't. But it seemed odd to me.
Yeah.
So
But it'd have to be frustrating trying to do
it was
an
frustrating.
investigation.
But you know what? We persevered. I think we had a very good team. They were aggressive, but they weren't. They were aggressive, but they were professionally aggressive. They were ethically aggressive, but they weren't going to just let it go. Let's find out, what did they know about this guy? They went to his house. I think they did a search warrant there too. They found a couple of things that were kind of weird. We never used them. It was a satanic book and some satanic ritual stuff. And I said, folks, Toledo they're not going to buy this. This is just way too crazy. Maybe there was satanic stuff going on, but let's not go there.
So, going into the trial, I'm sure you and Dean and probably everybody else got together and you had to come up with a strategy. How are we going to present this case? What do we really need to convince a jury on? So talk about maybe just a strategy session you guys have. Anything you remember about it? And
Would you mind if I have a water?
No, of course not.
Thank you. Strategy. Yeah, Dean did something. I don't think we've ever done this before. I know I never have, but he did some moot courts on this case. He brought people in as prospective jurors, and I don't know who they were because I didn't participate, but he brought them in, and then he spun the tale a couple of different ways. The satanic story, sort of, and then this is a man who got mad at a woman and killed her. And then a little bit in between. And, the whole idea about Catholic priests, Catholic nun, circumstantial evidence, how does this play? And it played pretty good, but the satanic part, no. And there was one prosecutor, he's no longer here, and he's no longer a lawyer. But, I don't really have to mention him. But he was very much wanting to do the satanic ritual bit. And I was, no, we're not. Dean didn't want to, and Larry didn't want, the rest of the team, no. It's just, no. Because how do you prove it? You can say here's what we have, and there's some ingredients that are untoward. But to go down that, make this all about Satan and all that, is just, we didn't. And so he was not on he went off the case. He didn't stay on the case because he wanted to do it that way. And so that's the strategy. The strategy was stay on the facts. I learned this from my husband, who was the criminal chief before Dean. Don't be diverted. Stay on the facts. Stay on your message. They're talking about, well, is he 5'8" or is he 5'9"? Well, I don't know if he's 5'8" or he's 5'9", but that's him. So that was the strategy, really. Stay on the facts. Don't be diverted by the fact that he's a Catholic priest or whatever. It's the facts are the facts.
Yeah. And I think Dean or Judge Mandros in his opening, I think he may have said, what it comes down to, this was a man killed a woman, angry or what. He said something.
Man who got mad. Man who got mad and killed a woman. It's right, because that is what it was. She was mad at him because she said he robbed God because he shortened the Good Friday Mass. I don't know the Good Friday Mass, because as I told you earlier, I'm Lutheran, so our Good Friday service, everything's gone, it's dark, they slam the book, everybody goes home. But I don't know if there's something that's particularly special that happens in the Catholic Church on Good Friday that he did not do, but that's what she said. He robbed God, he shortened the Mass, he took it, didn't do it right, and she was very angry. And she had been the big boss of that hospital, and she was a very, very, strident lady. And she chewed him out, and apparently maybe it was the last straw for him, because she maybe chewed him out many times in the past about other things. But that's one thing that we do know, that she did chew him out about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he got mad, and he decided, okay. She was in the sacristy because she was preparing the chapel for Easter Sunday services. So she was taking all of the chalice and all the things, the accoutrements, I guess you would say, out and putting them away, so that it was this bare bones sort of place, like the tomb. I think that was, that's the analogy.
What I will say, talking to Lee and to the jurors, they all were highly complimentary of Dean and the prosecution team overall. And there was a juror who actually gave me notes.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Well, that was a new thing. We didn't know, they didn't used to be able to take notes, but when you have so much scientific evidence and so many experts, I think Ossowick did right by the jury in allowing that to happen, because...
Or maybe he just put them together
afterwards. He did them at home,
but
maybe.
He sent them to me, and he said, look, when we went back there, it was almost unanimous right away that he's guilty. And he said, their thing was, if you believe the letter opener is a murder weapon, he's a killer.
Absolutely. There's no question. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, all the other things support the letter opener, because you have the blood spatter, you have the medallion on the altar cloth, the medallion on her head, the shape of the letter opener. And if you were to see that altar cloth, you can see the letter opener. I mean, it's dramatic. And at one point, I think in the trial, they had some sort of I don't know what kind of a machine it was that they were using, but something where they superimposed, they took the letter opener and they took the altar cloth and they superimposed the medallion and showed how it fit just perfect. So it wasn't just the mandible and the tip, but it was also the medallion and the blood on the altar cloth. And so where was the letter opener? In his desk. Well, who else was around? He didn't have a roommate, nobody else. Pristine letter opener, the speck of blood underneath the medallion, it all fits. And then you had the cleaning lady testify. She saw him coming out of the chapel. They heard the footsteps running. The one doctor saw him come out. So you put him, he wasn't off shopping that morning at the farmer's market. He was there, and he was in the chapel. So that was, even though circumstantial, still somewhat incriminating, I think.
And I think the juror told me that they had actually decided on day one. I think they they deliberated 3 hours one day.
Came
but
back the
then-
next
and they
day.
Came back the next day, because he's like, we should go home and sleep on it, and if we feel the same, whatever. And so then they come back the next day.
It was a pretty short, for a
6
long
hours.
trial and a complicated trial, it was a surprise. Usually, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drop that. Usually, a quick verdict, though, usually is good for us. Most of the time, if our case is good. Now, you know, if we don't have a crappy case, a quick verdict is not always good. But if we have a decent case, and I have to comment about Ossowick, because Ossowick was at the time running for the Court of Appeals, and he not only pulled the Father Robinson trial in May, but right around October, before the election, he did Tom Noe. But he was a fantastic judge. He was very calm, very reasonable. There was not contentious fighting like that you see on TV. You know, there was back and forth bickering and none of that. They were gentlemen and professional, and Nicole Corey is a lady on the defense team. Very professional, treated each other with respect. The judge kept order very well. I thought it was done. Showed Toledo in a very good light, I think, to the nation, to the world, that we are not a bunch of yahoos here, you know, in this little tiny town on Lake Erie. We really did know what we were doing.
So when it came back, I mean, what were your thoughts? I mean, were you with Dean? I mean, what was going on when you guys?
I don't even remember if I was even in the courtroom, but I probably was. But then we had a press conference, and because we thought we have to say something about this. We hardly ever do that, but we had a press conference and talked about how it was, you know, that what we did and how this was. And I mean, it was hard. It was, you know, anytime you take a 20-year-old case, we've done a number of them now since Father Robinson. We've done a lot of these old cases, but it's a challenging endeavor. So I was proud of them. I still am. And I think I told you when we talked at your office, I nominated them for the Home Run Hitters Award that is given not every year, but given only occasionally when there's an outstanding prosecution. And it's given by the National District Attorneys Association. And my team won it. And I was very proud of that. And that was, I think, they all got a bat. You know, that's the, you know, it's a baseball bat, but it's a Home Run Hitters Award for outstanding, you know, hitting it out of the park is that sort of the analogy. That the Scott Peterson prosecutors from California, they won it once, and a couple of other very prominent criminal cases have won. But I was proud of my team that they got that, and I have one of the bats here still.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen anybody, even the defense team, that said the prosecution team did not do a great job. So what lesson do you take from this trial, maybe to future prosecutors? I mean, what lessons did you guys learn that you can take from?
Well, I say follow the evidence where it leads. And if it leads to a bad place, you know, it leads to an elected official, it leads to a prominent rich person, it leads to a Hollywood star, I don't know, wherever it leads, follow it. And if you took an oath, not only as a lawyer, but you took an oath as a prosecutor to do what's right, honor the Constitution and laws of the state of Ohio with ethics and honor. So follow it and do what's right. And sometimes it's hard to do that. I just saw that the prosecutor in Cincinnati dismissed charges on someone that had been in jail for a very long time because she thought that he was not guilty. And she was a new prosecutor. She's not been elected for a long time. That was Joe Dieter's office for a long, long time. And she's a new prosecutor, and she is a courageous lady. And I sent her an email. I said, sometimes our job is very tough. You had great courage to do that. So that's the lesson. You follow the evidence. And if the evidence is convincing and it's overwhelming, you have to do your job. You have to do what's right, and it's not always easy. But you know, the other prosecutor that I was friends with is the prosecutor that lived in the community where George Floyd was killed. He was a wonderful prosecutor. He took a tremendous amount of abuse over that and lost his job as a result of that beating, that killing. But he was a very, very, very fine prosecutor and tried to do what was right. Sometimes it's hard, because sometimes public opinion doesn't appreciate what you've done. Like if you don't indict somebody that the people think should be prosecuted, but you don't have the evidence, or you don't think the evidence is believable, or it's not strong, it can cost you your job. But
There's probably lots of people you think are guilty, but you're like, I can't prove it.
But thinking it is not enough. So, I don't know, that's the lesson.
And in this case, you believed you could convict him.
I did. I believed it after, and especially it got stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger as we went along. And I think there was, when these witnesses came out of nowhere, the cleaning lady, bless her heart, she said, she told her son that she had seen Father Robinson coming out of the chapel. And he said, "You are a black woman in a Catholic hospital cleaning floors. Do not say anything." And she didn't until he was charged, and then she did. And she testified in the trial, and she was amazing. I mean, it was just courageous, I thought. So that was, there were those kind of nuances that you just think, people surprise you, but, people have integrity, they have good values, good soul.
And you've been talking about the case for a while now, but I mean, how should Toledo remember this case?
Well, I will say that, I don't celebrate anniversaries of convictions because we still lost someone precious. She gave her life to God and the church, and she was killed on a Christian holiday. That's very sad. So I'm not celebrating the trial. I'm not celebrating his conviction or even his demise. But I guess the message to Toledo is that we don't forget, and if there's a way, we will find it, even if it's 20 years later. The Cook brothers was 20 years after the fact. This was 20 years, so it can happen.